Hello.
It started as just another birthday party. Loud music, plastic cups, and people I half knew from college showing up in clean sneakers pretending not to look around for someone they used to date. Dylan, my best friend since middle school, was turning 21, and his mom had insisted on throwing the party at their place. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another night. Just another excuse to drink cheap beer and make small talk with strangers. I arrived around 7. The driveway was already full of cars, and I had to park 2 blocks down and walk past 3 houses just to get there. When I reached the porch, the front door was already open, and music spilled out into the neighborhood. Something upbeat and poppy that didn't match the quiet vibe of the cul-de-sac. Inside, the lights were dimmed, and people were everywhere. Some clustered in the kitchen, some in the living room, and a few had already taken over the backyard patio where a string of lights hung overhead like a low constellation. The house smelled faintly of vanilla candles and pizza, and there she was, Vanessa, Dylan's mom. I hadn't seen her in months, maybe more. She'd always been effortlessly put together, the kind of woman who made jeans and a t-shirt look like a designer outfit. But that night, she looked different. She wore a long black blouse with the sleeves rolled up, her hair loose and falling just below her shoulders. She moved through the crowd with that same quiet grace, balancing a tray of mini quiches like she wasn't the only adult in a house full of 20-year-olds. "Nate," she said when she saw me. "You made it." I smiled, holding up a 6-pack I'd brought as a polite offering. "Wouldn't miss it." She leaned in and gave me a brief hug, warm, casual, but longer than it needed to be. "It's chaos already," she said with a laugh, gesturing around. "I forgot how loud 20-year-olds are." "Well, you signed up for it," I teased. "Don't remind me." I followed her into the kitchen, where Dylan was busy trying to tap a keg with a crooked grin and half a plan. We high-fived, exchanged a few jokes, and before I knew it, the night had settled into its rhythm. Music, shouting, someone spilling salsa, people opening cabinets looking for napkins like they lived there. But I kept catching myself looking back at Vanessa. She wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary, just cleaning up plates, refilling drinks, laughing with a couple of Dylan's cousins. But there was something about the way she moved, calm, composed, a little tired, maybe, but always watching, like she wasn't part of the party, but not entirely separate from it either. At one point, I ended up back in the kitchen, pretending to look for a beer even though I'd already had 2. She was wiping down the counter near the sink, sleeves pushed to her elbows, a wine glass next to her half full. "You holding up okay?" I asked. She smiled, brushing hair behind her ear. "I forgot how much energy it takes just to host." "You're doing great. Seriously." "Thanks," she said. "Most of them are polite, but I'm counting the minutes until they leave." "Want help?" She looked at me, then nodded. "Later, when the smoke clears." By 11, the crowd had started to thin out. A few people said awkward goodbyes and stumbled out to rideshares. Someone passed out on the backyard lounger. Dylan had disappeared upstairs with a girl whose name I didn't catch. I stayed. There wasn't a conscious choice behind it. I didn't have anywhere else to be. And Vanessa, she hadn't asked me to leave. So I picked up a trash bag and started collecting cups. She didn't stop me. In fact, she handed me a second bag and smiled. "You don't have to do that, you know." "I know." We moved around the house in quiet tandem. I wiped down the coffee table. She gathered plates. The music had been turned down, but the air still carried that warm, buzzing leftover energy from too many conversations layered over one another. When we reached the kitchen again, She leaned against the island and sighed. Well, she said, that was something. Dylan owes you big time. Oh, he'll forget by morning, she said, waving it off. That's the privilege of being 21. I looked around. The house was calmer now. Dim. Peaceful. You want help with the dishes? I asked. She paused, then nodded. If you're offering. I moved toward the sink and started running warm water. She stood beside me, drying glasses with a towel, passing me new ones when I finished scrubbing the old. We didn't talk much, just the clink of plates, the hush of water, the occasional quiet laugh. At one point, our hands brushed, both reaching for the same bowl. She pulled back slightly. I glanced at her. She smiled faintly, not embarrassed, just aware. When we finished, I dried my hands and turned to her. I should probably head out, I said, checking the time. It's almost 1. She glanced out the window. You sure you want to drive? I'm good. Only had a couple. She hesitated. Then, you can crash on the couch if you want. Just saying. It's late. I blinked. Are you sure? She nodded. You helped. You earned it. I smiled. Then yeah, I'll take you up on that. I'll grab a blanket. She disappeared down the hallway and returned a minute later with a folded quilt and a pillow. Here, she said, handing them to me. It's not much, but the couch is comfortable. I've slept on worse, I said, trying to keep the moment light. She smiled again, tired, but warm. Well, good night, Nate. Good night, Vanessa. And then she walked down the hallway, leaving me alone in the quiet, candlelit living room. I unfolded the blanket and sat on the edge of the couch, suddenly very aware of the silence that had taken the place of laughter and music. I stared into the soft shadows on the walls and listened to the house breathe. I didn't know what had changed that night, but something had. Something quiet, subtle, the kind of shift you don't notice until it's already happened. The silence felt strange at first. After hours of music, shouting, and the low thump of bass through the walls, the sudden quiet made every little sound feel amplified. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the ceiling as the house settled, the rustle of the blanket as I shifted on the couch. I tried to lie down, pull the quilt over me, close my eyes, but I couldn't relax. My heart was still beating a little faster than it should have been, and my head replayed things I didn't expect to remember. The way Vanessa had looked at me when I offered to help, the sound of her laugh when I made that dumb joke about plastic cups being immortal, the warmth of her hand brushing against mine near the sink. I turned over and stared at the back of the couch. The pillow smelled like fresh laundry. Lavender, maybe. I wasn't sure how long I lay there. 10 minutes? 20? Eventually, I sat up. A soft glow spilled into the hallway from the kitchen. I could hear the quiet clink of glass. She was still up. I padded across the living room barefoot, trying to move quietly. I didn't know why I was going back in there. Maybe just to say goodnight again. Maybe because I wasn't ready to be alone with the silence. Maybe because part of me hoped she wasn't either. Vanessa stood at the counter rinsing a wine glass. She changed out of her blouse into a long navy sweater that hung loosely off one shoulder. Her hair was a bit messier now, like she'd run her fingers through it one too many times. She looked tired, real, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with effort. She looked up when I stepped into the doorway. Couldn't sleep? She asked softly. I shook my head. Too quiet. She smiled gently. I know what you mean. She gestured to the second stool by the island. Sit. I was just finishing a glass. I sat. The kitchen light was dim, warm. It felt different now, less like a room in a house and more like a pause between 2 hours you can't name. She poured me a splash of wine without asking, then pushed the glass toward me. "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. "One won't hurt." We sat like that for a moment. Two people at the edge of night, not saying anything urgent, just letting the quiet exist. "You know," she said after a sip, "I used to hate hosting parties." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You looked like a pro." She smiled. "I got better, but they always leave a weird aftertaste. All that noise and energy, and then suddenly nothing." "Yeah," I said, like the party's still echoing, but nobody's there. She looked at me thoughtfully. "Exactly." We talked about simple things at first, how Dylan used to love dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, how I nearly burned down our dorm microwave once by forgetting to add water to instant noodles. She laughed, covering her mouth slightly like she was surprised by her own amusement. Then the conversation shifted, slowly, like a tide turning. She told me how hard it had been after her divorce, how strange it was to go from a full house to just her and Dylan, how proud she was of him, but how quiet the house had become. "I keep thinking I should adopt a dog," she said, "or get into yoga, or take up painting. Something to fill the space." "You don't seem like someone who needs filling," I said before I could think twice. She looked at me, just a second too long, then smiled again. But it didn't reach her eyes the same way. "Thank you," she said softly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, heavy even. I took a sip of wine and leaned back. She reached for a cloth and began to wipe a corner of the counter, even though it was already clean. Her motions were slow, deliberate. Her fingers lingered on the wood. And then she said, almost too casually, "It's nice having someone here." I looked at her. Her profile was framed by the kitchen light, her expression unreadable. "I'm glad I stayed," I replied. She turned to face me again, resting her hands on the counter. "I didn't expect the night to feel this human." "What do you mean?" She exhaled. "Most nights, I clean up, go to bed, and wonder if anything I said all day mattered. If anyone really saw me." Her voice cracked slightly on that last part. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood up. The wine, the softness of her voice, the quietness of the hour. It all wrapped around us like a blanket too warm to ignore. I walked around the island, slowly, like giving her time to stop me if she wanted to. She didn't. I stood beside her now, just inches away. She looked up at me. Her eyes were tired, but alert, curious, waiting. I reached out and touched her elbow. Barely. She didn't flinch. "You're not invisible, Vanessa," I said quietly. "You're the most present person I've met in weeks." She let out a slow breath, not quite a sigh. Then she stepped back slightly, just enough to lean against the counter's edge. Her hand brushed mine. It stayed there. The world outside the kitchen didn't exist. The only sounds were the faint ticking of the wall clock and the slow inhale-exhale between us. "I should let you sleep," she whispered. I nodded, but neither of us moved. Finally, she picked up the two glasses and turned toward the sink. "Good night, Nate," she said gently. "Good night." She started walking down the hallway, slow, deliberate. She reached her bedroom door, paused, and pushed it gently open. Then she turned her head. The light from her room caught the curve of her cheek. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't close the door either. The living room felt colder now. I stood there, just outside the kitchen, watching the soft glow of her bedroom door across the hall. It was ajar, maybe 6 inches, just enough to let the light spill into the hallway. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she just forgot to close it. Maybe it was nothing. But I couldn't stop staring. I walked back to the couch, sat down, then stood again almost immediately. I crossed the room and grabbed the blanket she'd given me earlier, not because I needed it, but because I needed something to do. My fingers kept fidgeting with the stitching along the edges. 100 thoughts pulled at me all at once. Was she waiting? Was this a line? Had I already crossed it? The house was silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to have quieted. I walked halfway down the hallway before stopping in front of a framed photo. Dylan in a baseball uniform, maybe 10 years old, his arms slung around his mom's shoulder. She looked almost the same. Maybe a few more laugh lines, maybe a touch more softness around the eyes. But it was her. Confident, vibrant. And now here I was, 20 years old, standing outside her door like some confused teenager on the edge of something I didn't understand. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped, then knocked anyway, softly, just once. Her voice came almost instantly. "It's open." I didn't speak. I pushed the door a few more inches and stepped into the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in that oversized sweater, now with her legs tucked beneath her. She wasn't holding a book or scrolling through her phone. She wasn't doing anything, really, just waiting. The lamp on her nightstand cast a warm halo over her face, catching the glint of a silver necklace I hadn't noticed before. Her eyes met mine. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look afraid. She just looked ready. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yeah. I just couldn't sleep," she finished for me. I sat down on the small upholstered bench at the foot of her bed. I didn't want to crowd her. I didn't know what this was yet. I didn't want to assume anything. She shifted slightly, turning toward me. "It's a weird feeling," she said. "Letting someone into your house after the noise is gone. Into your quiet." I knew what she meant. "It doesn't feel like your space anymore," I said. "It feels borrowed." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Exactly." We sat in silence for a while, like two people on opposite shores of the same memory. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "You're very kind, Nate." I looked up. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "No," she said quickly. "Not bad. Just rare." I shrugged. "You're easy to be kind to." That made her pause. "I don't feel that way most days," she admitted. "I feel invisible, or too much, or like I'm just waiting for something to change without knowing what." There was a lump in my throat. "You're not too much," I said quietly. "You're honest, and warm, and beautiful." She looked down, letting her hair fall forward, as if the compliment embarrassed her more than it should have. When she looked up again, her eyes were damp. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I'll believe them." I stood slowly and took a step forward. Her breath caught, but she didn't move away. I sat beside her on the edge of the bed, just close enough for our knees to touch. "Maybe I want you to believe them," I said. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was electric. She reached for my hand. Her fingers curled into mine without hesitation, like they'd done it before in another life. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. "Neither do I," I replied. She turned toward me fully now, her hand still in mine, her eyes searching my face for something. A reason, a signal, permission. "I've spent so long trying to keep the pieces together," she said. "For Dylan, for the house, for everyone. But tonight, she didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she leaned in, and I didn't stop her. Our lips met softly, not hungry, not desperate, just slow, exploratory, honest. She pulled back slightly after the first kiss, her forehead resting against mine. "I didn't plan for this," she said. "I didn't either." We sat like that for a long moment, her hands still in mine, her breathing close and warm, the quiet hum of a late night wrapping around us like a second blanket. Then she pulled the covers back and whispered, "Stay, just stay." I nodded, and for once in a long time I didn't feel uncertain. I just felt home. The morning light crept into the room slowly, diffused by the thin curtains that fluttered slightly with the breeze from the cracked window. I opened my eyes, unsure at first where I was. The ceiling was unfamiliar, the room too quiet, too still. Then I felt the warmth beside me, her. Vanessa was still asleep, her face turned slightly toward me, hair fanned over the pillow. She looked peaceful, soft. Her hand rested on my chest, fingers curled lightly, as if they'd found a place to land in the middle of the night and never left. I didn't move. I didn't want to, because the moment was perfect, and dangerous, and real in a way I hadn't expected when I first walked through her front door the night before. But my heart was a mess. What did this mean? Was it just a one-time moment of connection, of loneliness answered? Or was there something else behind the way she looked at me in the kitchen, in the hallway, in her bed? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it carefully, trying not to wake her. A message from Dylan. "Thanks again for coming last night. Sorry I disappeared, LOL. Hope Mom didn't rope you into cleaning the whole place." I stared at the message. He had no idea. Guilt settled low in my stomach, uncomfortable and tight. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to disturb her. The house was silent except for the distant hum of traffic starting to pick up outside. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. My hair was messy, shirt wrinkled, but it wasn't the physical signs that made me uneasy. It was the shift inside me. The line had been crossed. That was clear. But what came after? When I stepped back into the room, Vanessa was awake. She sat up slightly, the covers pulled over her chest, watching me with that same unreadable expression I remembered from the kitchen. She looked calm, maybe even content. But there was something else. A flicker of uncertainty, like she wasn't sure what to say now that morning had arrived. I sat on the edge of the bed, unsure of my place now, unsure of the tone to take. "Morning," I said softly. She smiled. "Hey." A pause. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." "Me too." She reached out and took my hand again, fingers light this time, more tentative. "Last night wasn't planned," she said. "I know, but I don't regret it." "Me neither." She looked relieved, but still cautious. "I just don't know what this is now." I turned slightly toward her. "We don't have to figure it all out right away. I'm not going to pretend I have the answers." She nodded slowly, pulling the blanket around her a little tighter. "You're very mature for your age." I've heard that before, usually right before someone tells me I shouldn't be here. Vanessa laughed quietly, and it felt good, real again, not tense. "I'm not going to say that," she said. "Good." A few moments passed in silence. Then she asked, "Do you want coffee?" I smiled. "Only if you're making it." We walked into the kitchen together, not awkwardly, not nervously. just quiet, like two people in the same moment trying not to wake the rest of the world. She moved around the kitchen easily, grinding beans, filling the kettle. I leaned against the counter, watching her. She caught me looking and smirked. What? Nothing. Just, this feels weirdly normal. It's not. No, it is. But it shouldn't be. She set two mugs down and leaned against the counter beside me. This doesn't have to be a mistake, she said suddenly. I never thought it was. She nodded, looking down at her cup. But it complicates things. Dylan. I know. You're his best friend. I still am. She met my eyes. Are you going to tell him? I paused. The question was fair, but I wasn't ready for it. I don't know, I said honestly. Should we? She didn't answer, and that said more than anything. We drank coffee together in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't heavy, but thoughtful. A silence that came after something big, something intimate, something that shifted the foundation under your feet just slightly, enough to make you notice every step afterward. Later, she walked me to the door. I turned before I stepped out and looked at her. Really looked. Her hair was still tousled, her sweater now pulled over her shoulder again. She looked like herself, but different, closer. Last night, I said. It meant something to me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Me too. I'm not sure what happens next. Neither am I. She hesitated, then reached up and gently touched my cheek. But you can come back, she said. I smiled, and then I left. But not really, because something in me had stayed behind. Days passed, but the night never really left me. I kept replaying it. The hum of the music before the party ended. The clink of glasses in the quiet kitchen. The way her fingers curled around mine, hesitant but wanting. And the softness of her voice when she told me I could stay. It had felt like stepping over a line I didn't know was there until I crossed it. Now every text from Dylan made my chest tighten just a little. Every glance at my phone screen brought a wave of something I couldn't name. We were still friends. Nothing had changed between us, at least not on the surface. But I hadn't been back to the house since. Not yet. I didn't know how to be around him while I was still untangling everything I felt. Vanessa hadn't messaged me. Not directly. But 3 days after the party, she sent a simple photo to the group chat. A tray of lemon bars on the kitchen counter, neatly arranged with powdered sugar dusted on top. Still cleaning up from Friday, she'd written. Rewarding myself. I stared at that image for a long time, at the subtle details in the frame, the familiar corner of the island, the folded dish towel she always kept by the sink. There was no hidden meaning in the image, but I felt it anyway, like a note without words. I didn't reply in the chat, but I texted her privately. Me. Didn't know you were a lemon bar person. Her response came 5 minutes later. Vanessa, there's a lot you don't know. That was it. No emojis. No haha. Just that. And it hit harder than I expected. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and my apartment filled with that golden hour hush, I stood staring at my car keys for nearly 15 minutes before finally grabbing them. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just drove. When I pulled up outside her house, her porch light was already on. The blinds in the living room were half drawn. The front door opened before I even reached the top step. Vanessa stood there, barefoot, wearing a soft dark sweater and jeans. Her hair was tucked behind one ear, and there was a tired sort of softness in her smile, like she'd been waiting, but wasn't sure she should. You didn't text, she said quietly. I wasn't sure I should. She opened the door wider. I'm glad you did. I stepped inside. The house smelled like something sweet had just come out of the oven. The kitchen light was on. A plate of lemon bars sat half-covered with foil on the counter. We didn't talk right away. She poured tea instead of wine this time, and we sat at the kitchen island again just like before, as if we were resetting something without saying it aloud. I've been thinking, she finally said. I nodded, waiting. That night, it wasn't just the wine or the moment. At least not for me. It wasn't for me either. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. But we need to be careful. I know. Dylan comes home in 4 days. I know that too. Silence again. She took a sip of tea, then said, I'm not ashamed of what happened. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not him. I wouldn't let that happen. She looked at me, long and serious. It might not be up to you. That stung, but she was right. Some things weren't ours to control. We sat in that truth for a while. Then she said more gently, I don't know where this goes. I don't know if there's even a this to name. Me neither. But I know I haven't felt that kind of quiet, the good kind, in a long time. And I felt it with you. My chest tightened. I don't want to lose that either, I said. She reached across the counter, her hand warm as it wrapped around mine. We don't have to name it, she said. We just have to be honest. I nodded. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't fall into each other like we had before. We just sat there, talking softly into the quiet, until the sky turned dark and the moon painted silver lines across her kitchen floor. When I left, she didn't walk me to the door. She just stood in the warm light and watched me go. And I realized then, what happened between us wasn't about filling a void or chasing something forbidden. It was two people who had been lonely in completely different ways finally seeing each other. Truly seeing. And even if it never became more than that night, that conversation, that moment, it was enough. Because some lines, once crossed, don't lead to chaos. They lead home.
Bye bye.